Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. The automatic doors at Walmart used to be just doors to me. Now they're a threshold I cross with my heart pounding and palms sweating every single time. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March 2023, and I was doing what I'd done 100 times before, grabbing groceries with my little brother Tyler. He was 19 then, home from college for spring break, and we were picking up ingredients for Mom's birthday dinner. The store wasn't particularly crowded, maybe 20 people scattered throughout the aisles, and everything seemed completely normal. I remember joking with Tyler about the ridiculous price of avocados while we loaded our cart with ground beef, pasta, and all the fixings for Mom's favorite lasagna. Just a regular Tuesday, two brothers running errands, nothing that would prepare me for what was about to unfold. We were in the cereal aisle when I first noticed her. A woman in her 50s with short gray hair and glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. She was holding her phone at an odd angle, pretending to text but clearly recording us. Tyler was debating between Lucky Charms and Cocoa Puffs, completely oblivious, but I caught her reflection in the shelf's metal edge. She quickly looked away when our eyes met through that distorted mirror image, but she didn't lower her phone. Something about her posture, the way she kept glancing at us and then at her screen, made the hair on my arms stand up. I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was just one of those people who filmed everything for social media. But then I saw her lean close to a Walmart employee stocking shelves nearby, whispering urgently while gesturing in our direction. The employee, a young guy with a patchy beard, looked at us, nodded, and spoke into his walkie-talkie. Tyler finally settled on Lucky Charms, tossing the box into our cart with a grin. We moved through the store methodically, bread aisle, dairy section, frozen foods. But that woman followed us like a shadow, always 2 aisles over, always with her phone raised. More employees started appearing, pretending to straighten shelves or check inventory, but their eyes tracked our every move. By the time we reached the pasta sauce section, I counted at least 4 employees hovering nearby. The woman had positioned herself at the end of our aisle, no longer hiding her filming. She held her phone steady, horizontal, like she was shooting a documentary. I wanted to confront her, ask what her problem was, but Tyler was rambling about some professor who failed half his class, completely unaware of the strange surveillance network forming around us. I kept my mouth shut and focused on finding Mom's favorite marinara sauce, the one with the green label and chunks of garlic. The confrontation came when we were heading to the checkout lanes. A wall of people materialized in front of us, 3 employees in blue vests, a guy in a white shirt with a manager tag, and that woman with her phone still recording. Tyler stopped mid-sentence about his roommate's terrible cooking. The manager, a heavy-set man with a thin mustache that looked drawn on with pencil, stepped forward. "Sir, we need you to come with us," he said, his voice loud enough to draw stares from nearby shoppers. The woman moved closer, her phone now inches from my face. "I saw everything," she announced to no one in particular, her voice shrill with self-importance. "This man was switching price tags on the meat products. I have it all on video." My brain struggled to process what she'd just said. Price tags, meat products. We'd grabbed prepackaged ground beef without even checking the price. "That's impossible," I said, keeping my voice level despite the heat rising in my chest. "We haven't touched any price tags. Check your security cameras." The manager's mustache twitched. "We'll handle this internally first. Please come with us to the office." Tyler's face had gone pale, his hands gripping our cart like it was a life raft. Other shoppers had formed a semicircle around us, some pulling out their own phones to record. The woman kept narrating to her camera, describing how she'd caught a thief in action, and how people like this think they can get away with anything. Her voice carried across the store, and I could see people from the pharmacy counter craning their necks to watch. A mother pulled her kids closer, shooting me a disgusted look. An elderly man in a veteran's cap shook his head sadly. In seconds, I'd transformed from a guy buying lasagna ingredients to a criminal in their eyes, all because one woman with a phone decided I looked suspicious. The manager insisted we abandon our cart and follow him. When I asked again about reviewing the security footage, he said that would be handled after we sort this out. 2 loss prevention officers appeared, young guys in black shirts trying to look intimidating. One of them, barely out of his teens with acne scars across his cheeks, put his hand on my shoulder to guide me. I shrugged it off, which he took as aggression. "He's resisting," the woman shouted, even though I'd simply stepped away from his touch. Everything accelerated after that. The officers grabbed my arms. Tyler tried to intervene, saying this was insane, but an employee blocked him. Someone called 911. The woman circled us like a vulture, her commentary growing more dramatic. "He's getting violent. I knew he was dangerous the moment I saw him." I stood completely still, arms at my sides, but the narrative had already been written. By the time the police arrived 12 minutes later, the woman had turned me into a master criminal who'd been caught red-handed and was now threatening staff. 2 officers walked in. Officer Brennan, a stocky woman with her hair in a tight bun, and Officer Diaz, tall and lean with tired eyes. The woman rushed to them immediately, phone still recording, practically shouting her version of events. "This man was switching price tags. I have video. He's been aggressive with staff." She waved her phone like evidence, but I noticed she never actually showed them any footage. Officer Brennan approached me while Diaz talked to the manager. "Sir, we need to hear your side," she said, but her hand rested on her belt near her cuffs. I explained everything, that we were shopping for my mom's birthday, that we hadn't touched any price tags, that the store had security cameras that would prove our innocence. She nodded, seeming reasonable, and I started to relax. Maybe this would all be cleared up quickly. Then the woman played her trump card. "He fits the description of someone who's been doing this at other stores too. Check the alerts," she insisted. "My neighbor's a manager at Target, and they've been warning each other about a guy who looks just like him." That changed everything. Officer Diaz's expression hardened as he spoke into his radio, running my license. The woman kept embellishing her story, adding details about suspicious behavior she'd supposedly witnessed. "He was crouching by the meat section. He kept looking around nervously. He had something in his hand." None of it was true, but her conviction was absolute. The manager backed her up, saying his employees had noticed suspicious activity too, though he couldn't specify what exactly. Tyler tried to speak up, but Brennan told him to step back. The crowd had grown larger, maybe 30 people now, all recording with their phones. Someone had even started a Facebook Live. I heard fragments of commentary. "Caught stealing. Can you believe it? In broad daylight." The truth didn't matter anymore. The spectacle had taken on a life of its own. When Diaz returned from his radio call, his face was grim. "We're going to need to take you in for questioning," he said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "For what? Shopping while someone films me?" That's when the woman delivered her final performance. "He's getting aggressive again. I don't feel safe," she cried, stumbling backward dramatically, even though I hadn't moved an inch. What happened next still plays in slow motion in my nightmares. Officer Diaz stepped forward, hand on his taser. "Sir, turn around and put your hands behind your back." The crowd gasped collectively, phones rising higher to capture every angle. Tyler shouted, "This is insane!" and tried to step between us, but Brennan grabbed him. In the confusion, I instinctively raised my hands to show they were empty, a gesture of surrender that the woman interpreted differently. "He's reaching for something," she screamed. Diaz didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, spinning me around and slamming me against a candy display. Snickers bars scattered across the floor as he forced my arms behind my back. The cuffs clicked tight enough to cut into my wrists. Tyler was yelling. The crowd was cheering or gasping, and through it all, that woman kept her phone trained on me, narrating like a true crime podcaster. "I knew he was guilty the moment I saw him," she said breathlessly. "You can just tell with some people, you know." The racism in her tone was barely veiled, but nobody called her out. They were too busy capturing my humiliation in high definition. They perp-walked me through the entire store. Past the produce section where a girl from my gym stood slack-jawed with a pineapple in her hand. Past the electronics where my neighbor Mr. Peterson quickly looked away. Past the pharmacy where Mrs. Chen, who'd filled my prescriptions for years, covered her mouth in shock. Each step was documented by dozens of phones, their cameras tracking me like synchronized spotlights. The woman followed our procession, still filming, still commenting. "This is what happens when good people stand up," she proclaimed. "I probably saved this store thousands of dollars." At the exit, they had to pause to open both automatic doors wide enough for our group. In that moment, standing in cuffs while waiting for doors to open like some kind of criminal presentation, I felt something inside me break. The person I'd been when I walked into this store, confident, unworried, free to shop without scrutiny, was gone. They loaded me into the patrol car while Tyler stood on the sidewalk frantically calling our mom. The last thing I saw before they closed the door was that woman, finally lowering her phone, a satisfied smile playing on her lips as other shoppers congratulated her for her bravery. The next 72 hours were hell. At the station, they processed me like a real criminal. Fingerprints, mugshot, the whole humiliating routine. The charges were theft by deception and resisting arrest, based solely on that woman's testimony and the manager's vague support. Nobody had checked the security footage. Nobody had found any switched price tags. But the video of my arrest was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Walmart thief caught and arrested, with my face in the thumbnail. By the time I made bail the next morning, I had become internet infamous. My phone had hundreds of notifications, some from concerned friends and family, others from strangers who'd found my social media profiles and felt compelled to share their opinions about my character. The woman's video had been shared thousands of times. She'd edited it before posting, cutting out all the parts where I stood calmly and spoke reasonably, keeping only the moments that looked bad out of context. Local news picked it up. My employer saw it. My landlord saw it. Everyone saw it except apparently anyone who cared about the truth. It took 3 days for my lawyer to force Walmart to review their security footage. 3 days of hiding in my apartment while protesters showed up at my job demanding I be fired. 3 days of Tyler barely sleeping, blaming himself for not recording everything from the start. 3 days of Mom crying every time she saw another cruel comment online. When they finally watched the footage, it showed exactly what I'd said. 2 brothers shopping normally, never touching price tags, never doing anything suspicious. But the revelation came from an unexpected source. A teenage employee named Bradley had been stocking shelves in the meat department that day and had filmed the woman on his phone because she'd been acting strangely. His video showed her following several different customers, filming them before settling on us. Showed her whispering to employees, gesturing wildly, creating her narrative before we'd even noticed her. He'd been too scared to speak up initially, but his conscience got the better of him. The charges were dropped immediately. Walmart issued a tepid apology. The woman deleted her social media accounts and disappeared, but the damage was done. The truth got a fraction of the attention the lie had received. My mugshot still appears when you Google my name. I lost my job. My landlord didn't renew my lease. And now, every time I need groceries, I sit in my car for 10 minutes, building up the courage to walk through those automatic doors, wondering who might be watching, who might be filming, who might decide I look suspicious today. Ethan had been asking for the same Lego set for weeks, the one with the fire truck and the little firefighter figures. 3 years old and already obsessed with anything that had sirens and flashing lights. That Black Friday in 2019, I finally had a chance to get it at half price. I was a single mom pulling double shifts at the hospital just to keep us afloat, and every dollar saved meant something. The Walmart near our apartment opened at midnight, but I waited until 4 a.m. to avoid the worst of the crowds. Big mistake. The store was still packed, People everywhere grabbing TVs and electronics, carts bumping into each other in the narrow aisles. The toy section was pure chaos when we got there. Parents literally throwing boxes into their carts, kids crying, employees trying to restock shelves while dodging the mayhem. I had Ethan sitting in the cart seat, his worn-out dinosaur toy clutched in one hand while I scanned the shelves for his Lego set. That's when I first noticed her. A woman in a blue Walmart vest standing at the end of our aisle, not doing anything, just watching. She had this strange way of tilting her head like a bird studying something. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore thick-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down her nose. I figured she was loss prevention or maybe a seasonal hire who didn't quite know what to do yet. 20 minutes into our shopping, I'd seen her 4 more times. Electronics department while I grabbed a tablet for my nephew. There she was, organizing already organized DVDs. Grocery section when I stopped for milk. She appeared near the freezers, holding a pricing gun but not using it. Each time she'd glance our way, then quickly busy herself with some task. Ethan kept babbling about the fish in the pet department, completely oblivious to my growing unease. The store was so crowded that I told myself I was being paranoid. Lots of employees probably got pulled from different departments on Black Friday. Nothing weird about that, right? I finally found the Lego set wedged behind some board games on a bottom shelf. Score. While I reached down to grab it, Ethan started fussing about wanting to walk. "Mama down, want to see toys?" His favorite thing was touching every single box on the shelves, which usually drove me crazy but seemed harmless enough. I lifted him out of the cart and held his hand tight. "Stay close, baby. Lots of people here today." He immediately tried to dart toward a display of superhero action figures, but I kept my grip firm. The woman in the blue vest had vanished, and I felt myself relax a little. Just another hour and we'd be out of this madness. The crushing wave of shoppers hit us near the electronics section. People pushing, shoving, arguing over the last discounted TV. Someone's cart rammed into my hip, and when I turned to steady myself, my grip on Ethan's hand loosened for just a second. He pulled free and I immediately reached for him, but another surge of people pushed between us. "Ethan," I called out, but the crowd was so loud, Christmas music blaring from the speakers mixed with hundreds of conversations. I caught a glimpse of his green jacket moving toward the video game aisle. My heart started racing as I abandoned my cart and pushed through the crowd. "Excuse me, my son." But nobody was listening. Everyone focused on their own shopping frenzy. By the time I reached the video game aisle, he was gone. I ran to the next aisle, then the next. Nothing. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my lungs. I grabbed the first employee I saw, a teenager with bad acne and a name tag that read Justin. "My son, he's 3, green jacket, brown hair, he was just here." The kid looked overwhelmed but grabbed his walkie-talkie. "Code Adam at Electronics," he said, and suddenly the festive atmosphere shifted. Other employees appeared, the music cut off, and a voice came over the intercom. "Attention Walmart shoppers, we have a missing child. 3-year-old boy, green jacket, brown hair, answers to Ethan. Please check around you." The words echoed through the store and I felt like I might throw up. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Employees were everywhere, checking under clothing racks, inside dressing rooms, behind displays. Customers had stopped shopping and were helping look. Some woman with a thick Boston accent kept saying, "Don't worry, honey, kids wander off all the time in these big stores." But 20 minutes had gone by now, and the manager, a heavy-set man named Frank with sweat stains spreading under his arms, was on his radio constantly. Security guards had locked down all the exits. Nobody in, nobody out. They kept asking me the same questions. What was he wearing exactly? Did he have any favorite places in the store? Had anyone approached us? That's when I remembered the woman in the blue vest, and the words tumbled out in a rush. "This is Tom from security," a voice crackled over Frank's radio. "Need you to come to the office now, bring the mother." The walk to the security office felt like miles. My legs were shaking so bad I could barely stand. Inside the cramped room filled with monitors, Tom, an older black man with kind eyes, pulled up footage from the toy section. "Ma'am, I need you to watch this." On the grainy screen, I saw myself reaching for the Lego set, saw Ethan pull away in the crowd. Then, clear as day, a hand reached out and took his, the woman in the blue vest. She bent down, said something to him, and he went with her willingly. They walked calmly toward the back of the store while everyone else was fighting through the Black Friday chaos. "That's her," I whispered. "She was following us." Tom zoomed in on her face, but the image was too pixelated. Frank was already on his phone with police. The security footage tracked them through the store. She knew exactly where the cameras were, keeping her face turned away, using the crowds as cover. They went through sporting goods, past the pharmacy, heading toward the garden center. "Wait," Tom muttered, rewinding the footage. "How'd she get through that door? That's employees only." Frank checked his tablet, scrolling through employee records. "Nobody matching that description works here. Not in any department." My whole body went cold. This woman had dressed like an employee, studied the store layout, and targeted my son. The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers who immediately took over the security room. They radioed for backup while Tom kept tracking the footage. The last clear shot showed her leading Ethan through the garden center's exit door at 4:47 a.m. After that, nothing. "Ma'am, we need to search outside," one officer said, but I was already running. The garden center was this huge fenced area behind the store, filled with leftover Halloween decorations and Christmas trees. It was barely lit, just some yellow security lights casting weird shadows everywhere. Officers spread out with flashlights while I screamed Ethan's name until my throat burned. Behind stacks of mulch bags, nothing. Around the greenhouse, empty. Then I heard it. A tiny voice. "Mama?" It came from behind a bunch of wooden crates stacked against the back fence. I shoved them aside with strength I didn't know I had, and there he was, sitting on a pallet, still clutching his dinosaur, looking confused but unharmed. I scooped him up so fast I almost fell backward. He smelled like potting soil, and that weird fertilizer smell garden centers always have. "The nice lady said wait here for Mama," Ethan told the police officer while I refused to let go of him. "She gave me juice." Sure enough, there was an empty juice box next to where he'd been sitting. Apple juice, the kind they sell at the checkout lanes. The detective, a woman named Anita Hawkins who arrived later, searched the area and found something chilling. Fresh footprints in the dirt leading to a gap in the fence that had been cut with wire cutters. On the other side, tire tracks in the mud. Whoever this woman was, she'd prepared an escape route. The forensics team said the fence had been cut days before, maybe even weeks. She'd planned this whole thing, studied the store, got the vest somehow, waited for the perfect chaos of Black Friday when a child could disappear in the crowd and nobody would notice right away. They never found her. The investigation went on for months. Turns out there had been 2 similar incidents in neighboring states. Women in employee vests approaching children in big box stores during busy shopping days. None of the kids were physically hurt, thank God, but nobody could figure out the motive. The detective thought maybe she'd been interrupted, that someone coming into the garden center spooked her into abandoning whatever sick plan she had. They enhanced the security footage every way possible, but she'd been too careful. All they had was a vague description. White woman, 30s or 40s, medium build, brown hair, glasses. Could be anyone. I still shop at that Walmart sometimes because it's the cheapest option, but I never take my eyes off Ethan. He's 7 now and doesn't remember much about that day. Just something about a nice lady and juice. I remember everything. Her tilted head, those sliding glasses, the blue vest that didn't quite fit right, and those 20 minutes of pure terror that felt like a lifetime. So I'm gonna share something that happened to me about 8 months ago that still gives me chills whenever I drive past that place. I'm 58, been retired from full-time security work for about 3 years now, but my pension wasn't cutting it with everything getting more expensive. When I saw the posting for overnight parking lot patrol at the local store, I figured it'd be easy money. Just drive around in my truck, keep an eye on things, maybe catch some kids trying to steal catalytic converters. The manager, this guy named Vincent, who couldn't have been older than my youngest son, told me they'd been having issues with car break-ins for weeks. People were getting their windows smashed, purses stolen, that kind of thing. He said I'd mostly be working alone, just me and my flashlight from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 6 nights a week. Sounded perfect for someone who's always been a night owl anyway. The first few weeks were exactly what I expected. Boring as hell, but peaceful. I'd park near the grocery pickup area and do rounds every hour or so, checking behind the dumpsters and making sure nobody was sleeping in their cars or doing drug deals by the garden center. The worst thing I'd encountered was some teenagers trying to hotbox in a beat-up Camaro, and they scattered the second they saw my headlights. I started bringing a thermos of coffee and some podcasts to keep me company during the quiet stretches. The parking lot was huge, probably could fit 400 cars easy, with these massive light poles that cast long shadows between the rows. During the day it was always packed, but at night it turned into this weird ghost town with just a handful of cars belonging to the overnight stalkers. I'd gotten comfortable with the routine, maybe too comfortable because I wasn't expecting what happened on that Friday night in August. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I noticed him. I was doing my usual sweep of the far end of the lot where the semi-trucks park for deliveries, and there was this figure just standing there between two trailers. First I thought maybe it was one of the delivery drivers taking a smoke break or something, but when I got closer with my headlights, I could see he wasn't wearing any kind of uniform. Just regular clothes, dark jeans and a hoodie pulled up over his head. He was maybe average height, skinny build, and he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot like he was nervous or tweaking on something. What really caught my attention was how he kept looking around, not casual-like, but real deliberate, like he was checking to see if anyone was watching him. I've been doing security work for 25 years, and you develop a sixth sense for when someone's up to no good. This guy had that energy radiating off him in waves. I parked about 50 feet away and grabbed my flashlight, the heavy-duty kind that doubles as a club if you need it to. Company policy said I wasn't supposed to confront people directly, just observe and call the real cops if things looked serious, but this felt different. Maybe it was the way he was positioned right next to this expensive-looking pickup truck, or how his head snapped up when my truck door slammed shut. I called out to him, trying to keep my voice friendly but firm. "Hey there, you need some help with something?" That's when everything went sideways. Instead of answering or walking away like most people would, he just stared at me for what felt like forever. Even with the distance between us, I could see his face in the glow of the parking lot lights, and there was something wild in his expression. His eyes were too wide, too focused, like an animal that's been cornered. Then he started walking toward me, not fast, but with this weird, deliberate pace that made my gut twist. "You need to leave," I told him, raising my flashlight so he could see I had it. "This is private property." That's when he pulled something out of his hoodie pocket, a box cutter with the blade already extended. The metal caught the light and I immediately knew I was in deep shit. He didn't say a word, just kept coming at me with this blank expression like he was in some kind of trance. I'm not a small guy. Used to play football in high school and I've kept most of my size, but I'm also pushing 60 and this dude looked like he had nothing to lose. I backed up toward my truck, trying to keep the flashlight beam on his face to maybe blind him or throw him off, but he just squinted and kept advancing. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears, and I was calculating whether I could make it back to the driver's seat before he reached me. The whole parking lot felt like it had gotten 10 times bigger, and the distance to my truck might as well have been a mile. Before I could take another step, he lunged. I tried to dodge to the right, but the blade caught me across my left forearm, slicing right through my security jacket and the shirt underneath. The pain was immediate and sharp, like touching a hot stove, and I could feel the warmth of blood soaking into my sleeve. I swung the flashlight at his head, connected hard enough to hear the impact, and he stumbled backward, cursing. For a second I thought that would end it, but instead of going down or running away, he just shook it off and came at me again. This time I was ready. I grabbed his wrist with my good hand, and we ended up wrestling for control of the box cutter. He was stronger than he looked, wiry and desperate, and he kept trying to twist the blade toward my face or neck. We crashed into the side of a parked car, setting off the alarm, and that's when he suddenly broke free and took off running. Not toward the street like I expected, but straight toward the store entrance. I stood there for a moment, breathing heavy and looking down at my arm. The cut was deeper than I'd initially thought, not life-threatening, but definitely more than a scratch. Blood was dripping onto the asphalt, and my sleeve was completely soaked through. The adrenaline was making me shaky, and I could taste copper in my mouth from where I'd bitten my tongue during the struggle. I pressed my good hand against the wound to try and slow the bleeding while I jogged toward the store entrance, my work boots echoing across the empty parking lot. The automatic doors slid open with that familiar whoosh, and the sudden blast of air conditioning hit me like a wall. Inside, everything looked normal. Too normal. The bright fluorescent lights, the muzak playing softly overhead, a few overnight customers wandering the aisles with their shopping carts. It was like stepping into a different universe where what just happened outside might as well have been a nightmare. I spotted Ashley, one of the overnight stockers I'd gotten to know, restocking shelves in the pharmacy section. She was this college kid, maybe 21, always friendly when I'd stop in to use the restroom or grab a snack from the break room. When she saw me walking toward her with blood on my shirt, her eyes went wide and she nearly dropped the box of vitamins she was holding. "Holy crap, what happened to you?" she asked. But I was already scanning the store, looking for any sign of the guy who'd attacked me. I told her to call the police and get Vincent on the phone, that there was a dangerous person loose in the store with a weapon. She pulled out her phone immediately, but I could see the confusion on her face. From her perspective, everything was calm and quiet. A few customers were shopping like nothing had happened. An elderly woman was comparing prices on breakfast cereals, and some guy in a baseball cap was reading magazines near the pharmacy counter. The normalcy of it all was almost more disturbing than the attack itself. I spent the next 3 hours trying to help the cops search for this maniac, my arm bandaged up with gauze from the first aid kit. 2 officers showed up pretty quickly. Officer Reynolds, this veteran cop who looked like he'd seen everything, and his younger partner whose name I never caught. They took my statement while walking through every aisle, checking the restrooms, the employee break areas, even the storage closets. Reynolds kept asking detailed questions about the suspect's appearance, and I described the hoodie, the skinny build, the wild look in his eyes, but it felt like describing a ghost. How do you explain to someone the feeling you get when you're looking at a person who's completely disconnected from reality? We reviewed the security footage from outside, and you could clearly see the attack happening, but the camera quality was garbage, and his face was mostly hidden by the hood. The cops expanded their search to the surrounding businesses, thinking maybe he'd fled to the gas station next door or the fast food place across the street, but they came up empty. Around 6 a.m., just as I was starting to think this guy had vanished into thin air, one of the morning shift employees found him. Janet, who worked in the warehouse section, was moving some pallets when she heard what sounded like cardboard rustling. She followed the noise to this massive display of paper towels and toilet paper that was set up near the loading dock, one of those promotional things they build to look like a castle or whatever. When she pulled back some of the outer boxes, there he was, curled up inside like some kind of sick animal, still wearing the same hoodie, still holding the box cutter. Janet screamed loud enough to wake the dead, and security came running. By the time the cops got back there, he was trying to crawl deeper into the display, knocking boxes everywhere and muttering something under his breath that nobody could understand. They had to drag him out by his ankles, and even then he kept slashing at the air with that blade, until they got it away from him. The real kicker came later that afternoon when Reynolds called me at home. Turns out this wasn't some random drug addict looking for trouble. His name was Kevin Walsh, and he'd been banned from that specific location back in January after assaulting 2 different employees during separate incidents. One was a cashier he'd grabbed by the throat when she asked to see his receipt, and the other was a maintenance worker he'd threatened with a screwdriver in the parking lot. The cops had photos, incident reports, the whole 9 yards. Store management was supposed to have his picture posted in the security office and train all the staff to watch for him, but somehow that information never made it down the chain. Vincent, my manager, claimed he'd never heard of Kevin Walsh and had no idea there was a banned individuals list. When corporate got involved, they discovered that the previous security coordinator had quit without passing along any of the critical safety information, and the replacement had never been properly trained on the system. So here's the thing that still pisses me off. I almost died because of paperwork. Because someone couldn't be bothered to do their job properly or train their replacement. Kevin Walsh should never have been able to get within 100 yards of that property, let alone hide inside the store for hours with a weapon. I ended up needing 12 stitches in my arm, and I still have a scar that aches when it rains. The company offered me some bullshit settlement and a different position at another location, but I turned it down. I'm done with security work, done with putting my life on the line for minimum wage and managers who don't give a damn about their employees' safety. Walsh got sentenced to 3 years for assault with a deadly weapon, plus violations of his existing restraining orders. As for me, I found work doing maintenance at a local school district, day shift only, no weapons, no psychopaths hiding in cardboard displays. Sometimes the simple jobs really are the best ones. The night shift at Walmart changes you after a while. 2 years behind that customer service desk during the graveyard hours, and I'd memorized every creak of the building, every pattern in those ugly beige floor tiles, every fluorescent bulb that flickered just a bit too much. 22 years old, drowning in student loans, and this was how I survived while finishing my associate degree in business. The pay was decent enough for what it was, and honestly, I preferred the quiet emptiness to dealing with the daytime crowds. During those late hours, the store felt like an abandoned spaceship drifting through the night, all sterile lighting and endless aisles stretching into darkness. Most of our regular customers were predictable, in their own strange ways. There was the old woman who came in every Friday at exactly 11:30 p.m. to buy cat food and frozen dinners, always counting out exact change from a little purple coin purse. The truck driver who stopped by every other Wednesday for energy drinks and beef jerky, still wearing his company uniform with grease stains on the sleeves. And then there was Harold, though I didn't know his name until much later. 70s, maybe early 80s, with this carefully combed white hair and these thick-rimmed glasses that magnified his watery blue eyes. Every Tuesday evening around 8 p.m., like clockwork, he'd shuffle through the automatic doors with his worn leather wallet already in his trembling hands. Harold's routine never varied, not once in the 8 months I'd been watching him. He'd grab one of those small red baskets from the stack near the entrance, never a cart, and make his way down the same exact path every single time. Aisle 7 for a loaf of Wonder Bread and a jar of Skippy peanut butter. Aisle 12 for a gallon of 2% milk, always checking the expiration date twice before placing it carefully in his basket. Then the produce section for exactly 3 bananas, never more, never less, and a single red apple that he'd examine under the harsh lighting like he was appraising a diamond. The whole journey took him precisely 27 minutes, and I knew because I'd started timing him out of pure boredom during those endless Tuesday shifts. The thing about Harold that really stuck with me was how he moved through that store like he was walking through his own living room. No hesitation, no checking his list, no wandering down random aisles like most people do. He had this quiet dignity about him, the way he'd nod politely to other customers and always say, "Thank you kindly," when the cashier handed him his receipt. His voice was soft and gravelly, like old leather, and he always wore the same navy blue cardigan with wooden buttons, even in the dead of summer. The other employees started calling him Tuesday Harold, because we could literally set our watches by his arrival. When September rolled around and the first Tuesday came and went without him, I figured maybe he was sick or visiting family somewhere. But then the second Tuesday passed and the third. By the fourth Tuesday in late September, I was genuinely worried about the old guy. During my dinner break, I even asked Brenda from the day shift if she'd seen him, but she just shrugged and said people come and go all the time. Still, there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind every Tuesday evening when 8 p.m. rolled around and those automatic doors stayed quiet. I'd catch myself glancing toward the entrance, expecting to see that familiar shuffle and navy cardigan. The store felt different somehow on those Tuesday nights, like a crucial piece of the routine had gone missing and thrown everything else slightly off balance. It was a Thursday night in early October when everything changed. The store had been dead all evening, one of those shifts where you start questioning your life choices and wondering if the universe is playing some kind of cosmic joke on you. Around 11:30 p.m., I was doing my final walkthrough before we started the deep cleaning routine. The fluorescent lights seemed dimmer than usual, and there was this strange electricity in the air, like right before a thunderstorm hits. I was checking the garden center area near the back exit, making sure all the outdoor furniture displays were properly secured when I saw him. Harold was standing about 30 feet away, right next to the rack of clearance plant fertilizer, facing the emergency exit door. Relief washed through me immediately. He was okay, just shopping at a different time for whatever reason. But as I got closer, ready to call out a friendly greeting, details started registering that made my chest tighten with unease. His skin looked waxy and translucent under the harsh lighting, like old parchment paper, and his usually neat white hair hung limp and disheveled around his face. The navy cardigan was there, but it seemed faded, almost gray, and hung on his frame like it was 3 sizes too big. Most disturbing of all, he wasn't moving. Not even breathing that I could see. Just standing there, completely motionless, staring at that exit door with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Harold?" I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the empty space. "Hey, Harold, is everything all right?" He didn't respond, didn't even twitch. I took a few more steps closer, close enough now to see that his eyes behind those thick glasses were completely unfocused, like he was staring through the door into some other dimension entirely. His mouth hung slightly open, and there was this grayish pallor to his skin that reminded me of old newspaper left out in the rain. The whole scene felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate, like watching a movie where the audio doesn't quite sync up with the video. When I reached out to tap his shoulder, my hand passed right through him like he was made of fog. The moment my hand went through his shoulder, Harold simply wasn't there anymore. Not fading away or disappearing gradually, just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. The air where he'd been standing felt ice cold, and I swear I could smell something like wet earth and old flowers. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few seconds, staring at the empty space and trying to convince myself I'd been seeing things. Maybe the late nights were finally getting to me. Maybe I needed to cut back on the energy drinks. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen was real. The temperature around me slowly returned to normal, but that smell lingered for another few minutes before fading away completely. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harold's vacant stare and that unnatural stillness. The next morning, I called in sick to my day classes and spent the entire day researching missing persons reports online, checking local obituaries, anything that might explain what had happened. Around 3 p.m., I finally found what I was dreading to find. Harold Zimmerman, age 79, had been discovered in his apartment by his landlord after neighbors complained about a smell. The article was brief and clinical, but the date made my entire world tilt sideways. He'd been found on September 18th, but the coroner estimated he'd died nearly a week earlier, on September 12th. That was exactly 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks to the day from when I'd seen him standing in our garden center, staring at that exit door like he was waiting for permission to leave. The next few weeks were torture. I kept working my shifts, but every night I found myself checking that back corner of the store, expecting to see Harold again. I started researching everything I could about the building's history, about death, and what might keep someone tied to a place. Turns out our Walmart had been built on the site of an old grocery store that closed in the 1980s. Maybe Harold had shopped there too. Maybe that routine went back further than any of us realized. The rational part of my brain kept insisting I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But then I'd remember the smell of wet earth and flowers, the way the air had turned cold, and I knew better. 2 months later, I finally worked up the courage to ask my manager about getting transferred to the day shift. I told him I wanted to focus more on my studies, which wasn't entirely a lie. He approved the transfer, and I never worked another night shift at that store. Harold never appeared again, at least not that I know of. Sometimes I wonder if seeing him that night was his way of saying goodbye, or if he just needed someone to know that he was still there, still following his routine, still trying to find his way home. Hey everyone, I need to share what happened to my dad last Friday night because I'm still processing this whole nightmare. He's 78 years old, retired from teaching high school math for 40 years, and has always been the most independent person you could imagine. Since my mom passed 2 years ago, he's been doing everything himself: grocery shopping, cooking, maintaining the house, refusing any help from me or my brother. That particular evening, he decided to make his weekly grocery run to the big chain store on Maple Street around 8 p.m. because he preferred shopping when it was less crowded. He'd been feeling a bit lightheaded that day but didn't think much of it, attributing it to the heat wave we'd been having all week. Looking back now, I wish he had just stayed home or called me, but Dad has always been stubborn about maintaining his routines. He told me later that everything started normally. He grabbed a cart, made his way through the aisles, picking up his usual items: bread, milk, some frozen dinners, his favorite coffee creamer. The store was nearly empty except for a few late shoppers and the staff getting ready to close. Around 8:45 p.m., while he was in the canned goods aisle, a wave of dizziness hit him so hard that he had to grip the shelf to keep from falling. His vision went blurry, his legs felt weak, and he could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Panic set in as he realized he might collapse right there in the middle of the store. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright. The sounds of the store became muffled and distant, and he knew he needed to find somewhere to sit down immediately before he passed out. He abandoned his cart and slowly made his way toward the back of the store, using the shelves for support, desperately looking for the customer restroom he remembered seeing near the pharmacy section. When he finally reached the restroom, Dad managed to lock himself inside the single-person bathroom and immediately sat down on the floor with his back against the door. The cool tile felt good against his skin, and gradually the dizziness began to subside. He sat there for what felt like forever, trying to regulate his breathing and waiting for his vision to clear completely. During this time, he could hear the store's closing announcements over the intercom. First, the 15-minute warning, then 10 minutes, then 5. He knew he should get up and leave, but every time he tried to stand, the room would start spinning again. His phone was in his jacket pocket, but when he pulled it out, the screen showed only 3% battery life before going completely black. Dad said he remembers thinking he'd just wait a few more minutes until he felt completely steady, then make his way to the front of the store. He had no idea that the staff was already starting their closing procedures and wouldn't think to check the customer restrooms thoroughly. The next thing he knew, he was waking up on the bathroom floor in complete darkness. The motion sensor lights had turned off hours ago, and when he felt around for the light switch, his joints were so stiff he could barely move. The store was eerily quiet, no background music, no humming of refrigerators, no footsteps or voices, just an unsettling silence that made him realize something was very wrong. When he finally managed to turn on the lights and check his watch, it was 2:30 a.m. The store had been closed for over 5 hours and he was trapped inside. Dad tried the door handle, but of course it was locked from the outside, standard security protocol that he had no way of knowing about. He started knocking on the door and calling out, but his voice just echoed back at him in the empty store. The reality of his situation began to sink in as he realized that no one would be coming until morning, and even then it might be hours before anyone heard him. What happened next still breaks my heart when I think about it. Dad spent the next few hours alternating between pounding on the bathroom door and trying to conserve his energy. He told me the hunger wasn't the worst part. It was the thirst that really got to him. The bathroom had a small sink, but he was hesitant to drink from the tap because he wasn't sure if it was safe, and his diabetes medication made him more susceptible to dehydration anyway. As the hours dragged on, he started getting confused about time and place. At one point, he thought he heard voices and started yelling for help, but it turned out to be just the building settling, or maybe the heating system cycling on and off. The isolation was playing tricks on his mind, and he began to worry that even if someone did come to the store, they might not think to check the bathroom. He tried to stay calm by reciting math equations in his head, something that had always helped him focus. But even that became difficult as his blood sugar levels fluctuated from not eating. Around 6 a.m., Dad heard what he thought might be footsteps in the distance. He gathered all his remaining strength and started banging on the door with both fists, shouting as loudly as he could manage. The cleaning crew had arrived for their morning shift, and thank God, one of them, a woman named Claudia, heard the commotion coming from the back of the store. She called out to ask if someone was in there, and when Dad responded, she immediately radioed for her supervisor. It took them nearly 20 minutes to figure out how to unlock the bathroom door because it required a manager's key and getting security involved. When they finally opened the door, Dad was sitting on the floor, pale and shaking, completely disoriented. Claudia later told me that he kept apologizing and asking what day it was. She stayed with him while her supervisor called 911, and she even gave him some water from her own bottle while they waited for the paramedics to arrive. The paramedics arrived within 10 minutes and immediately started checking Dad's vitals. His blood pressure was dangerously low, he was severely dehydrated, and his blood sugar levels were all over the place. They got an IV going right there in the store and transported him to the hospital where he spent the next 3 days recovering. The doctor said that at his age, being without food and water for that long, combined with the stress and his existing health conditions, could have been much more serious. While he was in the hospital, I decided to dig deeper into what had actually happened that night. Something didn't sit right with me about how he ended up locked in there for so long without anyone noticing. I called the store manager and asked to speak with whoever was working that Friday evening. That's when I discovered something that made me absolutely furious. 2 different employees remembered seeing my dad that night, and both of them had noticed he seemed confused or disoriented. The first employee, a teenage cashier named Cody, told me that around 8:30 p.m., my dad had approached him asking where the bathroom was, but also asking what time the store closed. Cody said Dad seemed a little out of it, but he just pointed toward the back and didn't think much more about it. The second employee, an older woman who worked in the deli section, said she saw Dad leaning heavily on a shopping cart around 8:45 p.m. and asked if he needed help. When she approached him, he told her he was feeling dizzy and asked if there was somewhere he could sit down for a minute. Instead of offering to call someone or helping him to customer service, she just told him there were some chairs near the pharmacy and walked away. She admitted to me over the phone that she assumed he was just being difficult because elderly customers often complained about feeling tired or wanting to rest. Neither employee thought to follow up or alert a manager that there was a customer who might need medical attention. What really pushed me past the breaking point was when I requested to see the security footage from that night. The store manager initially resisted, but after I mentioned potentially involving a lawyer, they agreed to review the cameras with me present. The footage showed everything exactly as the employees had described, but it also revealed something much worse. At 9:15 p.m., 15 minutes after the store had officially closed, you could see the night manager doing his final walkthrough. He passed right by the bathroom where my dad was trapped, and you could actually hear faint knocking sounds on the audio. The manager paused for maybe 3 seconds, then kept walking. When I asked him about it later, he claimed he thought it was just pipes settling or maybe something shifting in the storage room next door. But watching that footage, seeing how close Dad came to being found that night, and knowing he had to suffer through 8 more hours because someone couldn't be bothered to check properly, it was devastating. The worst part was realizing that this could have been prevented at multiple points throughout the evening. if just one person had taken his obvious distress seriously. After Dad was released from the hospital, I knew I couldn't let this slide. He was traumatized, physically weakened, and had developed a genuine fear of going into stores alone. The man who had taught high school kids for 4 decades, who had raised 2 children and maintained his independence well into his 70s, was now afraid to leave the house without someone accompanying him. I reached out to the local news station and told them the whole story. The reporter, Beth Thompson, was incredible. She interviewed Dad, reviewed the security footage, and spoke with the store employees who had encountered him that night. When the story aired the following Wednesday, it sparked a huge conversation in our community about how we treat elderly customers and what protocols should be in place to prevent something like this from happening again. The store chain's corporate office contacted us within hours of the broadcast, offering to cover all of Dad's medical expenses and promising to implement new training procedures for their staff. The response from the community was overwhelming. We received dozens of calls and messages from other families who had experienced similar situations with elderly relatives being dismissed or ignored in retail settings. One woman told me about her mother-in-law who had fallen in a department store and waited 20 minutes for help because employees assumed she was just resting. Another family shared a story about their grandfather who had gotten lost in a large grocery store and wandered around for over an hour before anyone offered assistance. It became clear that Dad's experience wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger problem with how our society treats aging adults in public spaces. The store chain followed through on their promises, implementing mandatory training about recognizing medical emergencies and establishing clear protocols for closing procedures that include thorough checks of all customer areas. They also installed emergency call buttons in all single-occupancy restrooms and created a policy requiring managers to personally verify that no customers remain in the building before locking up. 6 months later, Dad is doing much better physically, though he still prefers to shop during daylight hours and always tells me exactly where he's going and when he expects to be back. The experience changed him, but it also opened up important conversations in our family about aging, independence, and knowing when to ask for help. Claudia, the cleaning crew member who found him, has become an unexpected friend. She stops by sometimes to check on Dad and even brought her grandchildren to meet him. The store manager who missed the knocking sounds that night ended up leaving his position, though I don't know if it was related to the incident. What I do know is that sharing this story publicly was the right decision. If it prevents even one other family from going through what we experienced, then something good came out of Dad's terrifying night locked inside that store. Sometimes speaking up is the only way to make sure these situations don't happen to someone else's loved one. It happened during a quiet stretch in late April, the kind of lull between spring break chaos and the summer surge. I was working the closing shift at a 24-hour Walmart in a mid-sized town in Missouri. Nothing unusual ever really happened there, unless you count the occasional expired coupon meltdown. I'd been at the register for 2 years, mostly evenings and overnights. People came and went, names blurred, but that night stuck. I remember it because the air in the store felt weirdly still, too calm, like the pause before a storm, and not just the kind that makes the ceiling tiles creak. The woman in front of me was returning a handful of random items: cheap makeup, a dog bowl, and a necklace. Not just any necklace. It was a silver heart-shaped locket, delicate and slightly tarnished, with a small engraving on the back. "Always with you." My stomach tensed. I knew that engraving. My grandmother gave me that locket on my 15th birthday. The hinge was worn in a very specific way, just slightly uneven, making it click when you closed it. I would have recognized it in a pile of 1,000. I scanned the barcode on the return tag, trying to stay calm, but I felt heat rising in my chest. That was mine, no doubt. She didn't look suspicious. Middle-aged, short hair, distracted like someone running errands while thinking about a dozen other things. When she left, I didn't stop her. I didn't say anything at all. I just flagged my manager saying I needed my break early and walked to the employee lounge. My purse was sitting in my locker, zipped shut. At first glance, nothing seemed off. But when I reached inside and rummaged through the smaller pocket, the locket wasn't there. Neither were my apartment keys. I dumped everything out on the table. Wallet, lip balm, headphones, all there. But not the locket. Not the keys. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe I left the locket at home by accident? Maybe I dropped the keys on the way to work? I texted my roommate, asked her to check my nightstand. Her reply came fast. "Your chain and keys aren't here." That's when the panic started to set in. Not loud or dramatic, but slow and creeping, like a faucet left barely running. I replayed everything from the day before. Had I noticed anything strange? My routine was painfully consistent. Shift ended at midnight. I bought groceries, walked to my car, drove home, locked the door. Nothing stood out. At least, that's what I thought. I couldn't shake the image of that woman placing my locket on the counter like it was some trinket she picked up at a yard sale. I asked the manager, Sam, if I could check the surveillance footage from the night before. He looked at me funny at first, like I was being dramatic. But I told him my keys were missing, and someone returned something that belonged to me. That was enough for him to log me into the back office system. We scrubbed through footage from the night before, starting with my shift ending. It was almost midnight. There I was, pushing my cart out to the lot, stopping briefly to rearrange a few bags in the trunk. At first, nothing seemed unusual. But then a figure appeared a few feet behind me, just outside the glow of the overhead lights. A man, tall, wearing a hoodie and jeans, walking slow but deliberate. He kept his head down, hands in his pockets. I never noticed him at the time. I kept going, loading groceries, slamming the trunk, unlocking the driver's side door. But what stopped me cold was what happened right after I got in and closed the door. He stepped up to the passenger side, looked around briefly, then leaned in and tried the door handle. It was locked. He turned and walked off toward the darker end of the lot. My first thought was, how the hell did he get my keys later? Because the next thing we saw, about 20 minutes after I had left, was that same guy circling back through the lot. This time, no hesitation. He went straight to my car, crouched low, and pulled something from his pocket. It was quick. He unlocked the door like someone who had done it a dozen times. Got in, sat there for nearly 3 minutes, then left with something in his hand. The footage cut as he stepped off the lot. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there staring at the paused frame of his figure, half lit by a single parking lot bulb, like something out of a dream you can't fully remember but know was wrong. Sam leaned back in his chair, silent for a second before saying, "You need to report this. Right now." I nodded, but honestly, my brain felt like it was lagging behind everything. This wasn't just about a locket. Someone had followed me, waited, and come back. And now he had my apartment keys. I felt exposed in a way I never had before, like every small routine I'd trusted had turned inside out. I left work early, heart thudding the whole ride home, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. When I got to my place, I didn't even go inside. I drove straight to my roommate's job and told her everything. That night, we didn't sleep at the apartment. My roommate Jenna called her brother and we stayed at his place. I kept imagining the man from the video unlocking our door, standing in our kitchen, touching things, watching us while we slept. It made my skin crawl. The next morning, I filed a police report and gave them a copy of the security footage. They said the plate on the guy's car was unreadable, and they couldn't promise much unless he showed up again or tried to use the keys somewhere. They told me to change my locks immediately. I paid a locksmith to swap out the deadbolts that same afternoon. What kept bugging me was how he even got the keys and the locket in the first place. I thought back to earlier that day. Had I left my purse unattended? I remembered one short moment when I'd stepped into the restroom and left it in the break room cubby. No cameras there. It couldn't have been more than 5 minutes, but that was all it would have taken. And if he knew what he was looking for, Maybe he had seen me open the locker before, maybe even on a different shift. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like this wasn't random. He'd watched. He'd planned. About a week later, I got a call from a nearby pawn shop. They'd seen a post I'd made online about the stolen locket. Someone had tried to sell it. The guy didn't leave his name, but the store kept the item and gave me a vague description. Tall, early 30s, faded tattoo on his left hand. Same as the guy in the footage. The shop owner said something else that stuck with me. He seemed real confident, like he didn't care if we asked questions. I thanked him and picked the locket up that day. Felt strange holding it again. Familiar, but hollow. I didn't put it back on. Since then, nothing else has happened. No signs of him, no weird noises at the apartment, no items missing. It's been quiet, but I still park closer to the store entrance, double-check every lock, and I haven't worked a night shift since. Some people think losing keys or jewelry is just a slip-up. But when you see someone calmly step into your life like it belongs to them, touch your things, wait in the dark, there's no going back to normal. That kind of fear doesn't scream. It just sits with you, quietly, until you forget what it felt like to ever feel safe. I had just finished a double shift at the warehouse that night, and the only thing keeping me going was the thought of heating up some leftover chili and crashing on the couch. This happened about a year and a half ago, when I was still living in Evansville, Indiana. I stopped by the Walmart off Route 41 around 11:30 p.m. Figured I'd grab a few things before heading home. That place always had a weird energy at night, mostly empty except for a few tired-looking employees restocking shelves and some quiet regulars like me. I didn't think twice about being there that late. I'd done it plenty of times before. By the time I pushed my cart out into the lot, the place was dead silent. The street lamps over the parking rows buzzed faintly, and there were maybe 3 or 4 other cars scattered around. Mine was parked a little farther out than usual, near one of those empty cart returns. As I got closer, I noticed a car slowly cruising past the rows, a faded silver sedan, headlights dim like they were barely hanging on. It wasn't speeding or anything, just creeping along real slow, like the driver was looking for something. I figured they were probably trying to spot their car or maybe looking for someone inside. Still, something about it stuck in my head. It made a wide loop around the far side of the lot, then doubled back and started heading in my direction. I didn't panic or anything, just glanced over a few times while loading the bags into my trunk. I kept my ears open, but there wasn't much to hear, just that faint crunch of tires over gravel. I'd only just closed the hatchback when the car pulled up behind me, kind of diagonal, cutting off the exit from my spot. The window rolled down slowly, and the guy inside leaned across the passenger seat. He looked to be in his 40s, scruffy beard, baseball cap pulled low, wearing a jacket with one of those peeling reflective stripes. His eyes were strange, wide, too focused for someone supposedly asking a casual question. He called out, "Hey, you seen a golden retriever around here? Lost him earlier, goes by Duke." His voice had this edge to it, like he was testing me. I glanced around, mostly out of reflex, and told him no. I hadn't seen any dog. Tried to keep it polite, didn't want to make it a thing. But instead of driving off, he just stared for a second, then turned the wheel slightly and let the car creep another few feet closer. He didn't say anything for a few seconds, just sat there with the engine humming low and that look on his face like he was waiting for something to click. I gave a quick nod and started walking toward my driver's side door, but the car crept even closer, real slow, until the front bumper was maybe a foot from mine. That's when he spoke again, this time a little louder. "You sure? He's real friendly. Might have jumped into someone's car." He smiled when he said that, but it wasn't the kind of smile that made you feel at ease. It felt rehearsed, like a mask that didn't quite fit right. I tried not to show it, but my instincts were screaming at me. I told him again, firmer this time, that I hadn't seen any dog and that I needed to get going. He stared a few more seconds, then shifted his eyes toward the store entrance like he was trying to spot someone else. The engine revved just a little, not a lot, just enough for me to realize he hadn't put the car in park at any point. I slid into my seat, locked the doors the second they closed, and kept watching him through the windshield. I didn't want to drive off just yet and have him follow me out into the street. He finally pulled forward, but not out of the lot. Instead, he turned sharply and parked one row ahead, facing toward me. His headlights stayed on. I waited a few seconds, hoping he'd shut the engine off or go inside, but he didn't. I didn't move either. We were just sitting there, two cars facing each other in a nearly empty lot, the buzz of the lights overhead filling the silence. That's when I noticed something else. There was no license plate on the front of his car. Indiana doesn't require them, but the bolts were there, like something had been removed. After another 30 seconds of that silent standoff, he switched off the headlights, but the car stayed running. I leaned forward slightly, watching him through the windshield, and saw his outline shift. He was reaching into the passenger seat for something, maybe the glove box. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned my key, put the car in reverse, and backed out faster than I probably should have. As I passed his car, I didn't look directly inside, but I could see his head was turned, watching me the whole time. I didn't go straight home. I took a few turns through side streets I knew well just to make sure he wasn't behind me. Checked the rearview mirror more times than I could count. Never saw headlights after I pulled onto the main road, but I didn't relax until I was parked in front of my building. Even then, I sat there for a few minutes with the engine off, windows up, doors locked. I replayed every part of the interaction in my head. His voice, the missing plate. How close he got without ever really threatening me outright. But it felt like a threat. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that sticks with you. Later that night, I talked myself into calling the non-emergency police line. I didn't have much to give them. No plate, no solid description of the vehicle beyond beat-up silver sedan. The guy hadn't actually done anything, technically. Just asked a question and stared too long. Still, the officer on the line said he'd note the report, and if anything similar came up in the area, they'd take a closer look. I asked if they'd had any other calls like that lately. He hesitated before saying, "We've had a few weird ones around that Walmart, yeah. For the next couple weeks, I switched grocery stores. Drove 10 extra minutes to avoid that lot entirely. A part of me knew he was probably just one of those guys who gets a kick out of creeping people out. But there was something too practiced in how he did it. Like he'd used the dog story before. Like he'd done this before. And I kept thinking about how he didn't seem surprised or frustrated when I said no. He seemed prepared. Eventually, I went back to that Walmart during the day just to prove to myself I wasn't letting fear decide where I shopped. But even now, I never go at night. Not alone. Not anymore. I don't know what that guy wanted, and I don't want to know what would have happened if I'd stood there a little longer or leaned into the car to get a better look. I still don't know if he was trying to lure someone or if I just happened to interrupt something else. Either way, I got lucky. I parked closer to the doors from then on, every time.